Hey everyone, welcome back to Lair Academy. It's Mickey again, and we're going to be taking a look at jQuery and how we can use it to send a Ajax request to delete a user's record. In this example, we have a table filled with about 50 user records. We have a name, email, and then we have actions on the right. And the way that's coded right now, if we were to delete a random record, like this one here, Broderick, if we delete him, we'll get a message at the top saying the user was deleted. So this is some basic functionality, but what if we're all the way down here and let's delete this professor here. So if we click on the delete button, we're automatically put back to the top. Well, this isn't really the best because what if the user I'm deleting next is all the way down the bottom? I'll have to scroll all the way back down. So let's learn how we can start implementing jQuery so that we are not automatically put to the top of the page every time we delete a user. Let's head on over to Sublime and start checking out what we have already. The two files I have opened automatically are the default controller as well as a list.blade. If we look at the default controller, you can see that we just have a index and a delete function here. The delete function takes the user, we delete it, and then all we do is redirect back with a message for success. In the list.blade file, we check that session to see if there's anything in it. And if there is something in it, well then we just display it. The next step, we just loop through each of the users and we pass the information in. You can see here is our delete button and we just have a route. We're passing it to the delete and we're just passing the user itself. We'll keep this as is just because if there are users not using JavaScript, we still want them to have the ability to delete it. However, if they are using JavaScript, we will write an onClick function and we'll name it delete user and we'll pass in the user's ID. So using Blade, we'll say user ID and we'll return false for the second argument so our href doesn't actually get followed through if we're using JavaScript. Now with that part done, let's create our function delete user. If we go all the way to the bottom of this Blade file, you can see we have a push script. So let's make our script tag and we'll say function delete user and it accepts a user ID. And we will be using the .get function from jQuery. So we will say $.get, and the parameter that we're going to be passing in is where we want to send the request. So we will say route, and we will say delete. Now our second parameter we will leave as blank, even though in our routes we're going to be passing the ID. And the reason we're going to leave it blank is because we can't pass in a JavaScript and PHP together. However, what we can do is we can add a slash on the end of this, and then we will append the user ID. So in the end, we'll end up with the route delete and the user ID. Now we have to pass in blank because we can't mix PHP and JavaScript together in this case. The next thing we need to do is the second parameter will be a function, and it is accepting a response. So we will end up in this function only if we have a successful Ajax request. For now, let's just console.log and let's log the response itself. We'll switch over to our default controller, and for now, let's just say return user. Now let's switch back to Chrome, let's give our page a refresh to get that latest JavaScript. We'll open our console and let's just randomly pick a user to delete here. We'll pick on Bradford here. When we delete it, you can see that we get a response. We get the user information that's returned back. I want you to note that this information is actually already in JSON format, and we can thank Laravel for this. By default, whenever we pass something back in the response with a simple return, like we're doing here in our controller, Laravel will automatically return that as a JSON response. So we actually don't need to write a response here, so this is actually fine as is. Now just to be safe, if we head back to our jQuery function, we're going to add a parameter at the end, and let's just put JSON. So this is the data type that this function is going to expect to be returned. Now the other way that we could have done this is we could have had some Ajax setup here, so we could do .ajax setup, and then this is just the parameters that we need to pass in, so we could tell all of our Ajax requests that we're going to accept JSON back. However, if we're just going to keep it as is, this JSON will work for only this specific function. Normally, we'll have Ajax set up for when we're posting data to Laravel. So we'll leave that in there. And back in Chrome, you can see that nothing's actually changed when we press delete on the object. However, I want to have more control over the options that get passed back. So in our delete function, instead of just returning the user, let's return a response, and let's make sure that response is JSON. In this response, we're going to return a variable called deleted. So let's create it at the top, and we'll pass it into our response. This gives us control to add more things into the response, such as the user if we really wanted to. So if we come back and we try to delete a user, well, it looks like we have an error. So the easiest thing to do is if we go over to our network tab, we can click on the error itself and it gives us a little preview. So here we can see undefined variable delete, and that's just my code. So we'll switch back to Sublime, and I gotta make sure I have the right variable here. So let's give this a refresh, and we'll delete an item, and you can see we have a deleted object as well as a user object. So this gives us a lot more control of the information that we're passing back here. So what we could do now is we could take this user delete, throw this in a try catch. So we'll try first to delete the user. If something fails, we'll just catch the exception here. So we'll just catch exception and we'll just name it E. So if something happens and our user isn't deleted, well, we can just change our variable deleted to false. And we'll remove the user from our response because we don't actually need it. Now you can see that we have two returns here, one for a response and one for a redirect. Now let's tackle the issue of using the same function for both of these items. What we're going to have to do is we are going to use Laravel's request class. So let's add it into the top. So we'll say request, and we will make the variable called request. Using this variable, we can have a function. So if request, and we'll say Ajax, then we want to return it this way. Otherwise, we'll just have the normal redirect here. We'll give this a save and we'll try out both methods. So if we switch back to Chrome, let's load up our console. And actually, let's comment this back out so we can delete. We can see that it's been deleted. Or we can right click on a button, copy the link, paste it in, and you can see we get our message here. So with this simple if statement, we're handling both Ajax requests, and underneath we are returning a redirect back with the message that the user's been actually deleted. So hopefully you think that's pretty awesome. However, there's one more thing that I'd like to do in this video. Before we delete the user, I want to give some feedback to the user that the row is actually being deleted. So right now, if we just click on it, you can see that nothing's actually happened. We just get the object deleted true, that person's still there. So what we need to do is on our table row, let's add an ID so jQuery can pick it up. We'll say user, and then we'll pass in the user ID. So this will make things such as user_2 or say user_5, just an item where we can look it up in jQuery. Now that we have this, let's head back down to our JavaScript function, and on success, well, remember we have that response, so we could say response dot delete it. You can see here it will return true or false. So we'll say dot delete it. So if our object has been deleted, what we want to do is let's add a class and then hide it. So we want to look up the row itself. So we'll say user_, pass in our JavaScript variable, and now we're going to add a class. If we take a look at our master file, I've already created a highlight row class. It just changes the background color and make sure that it's important. So we'll say add class, highlight row, and finally, once that's been added, we'll fade out, and let's fade out fast. So this is just some basic jQuery functions here. We'll uncomment our user delete, so we actually delete the user. If we come back, refresh to grab the new JavaScript, we can scroll down and we can start deleting people. And you can see that we get that nice yellow highlight, and then our user is deleted. You can also see that the page isn't fully refreshing, so we're not being pulled all over the place. Say we delete this guy and we refresh, you can see that he is actually gone, so our code's working. And that's it for this tutorial. Hopefully you found it interesting, and don't forget to sign up. Thanks.